First, let's go to those laws put into place last night to somewhat control 84 foreign criminals out on the street. After initially rejecting any consultation with the coalition, the obvious weight of public pressure saw Labor spectacularly capitulate to Peter Dutton's demands to make the laws more robust, meaning a swift passage last night through the Senate. The big change the coalition forced, and quite rightly, was that there would be mandatory curfews and electronic monitoring, not at the minister's discretion as originally drafted, and that criminals would be prohibited from working with children or to make contact with their victims. Now, it's shocking to me that none of those protections were in Labor's original bill. Joining me now to discuss this, someone who put plenty of pressure on Labor in the House this week, Deputy Liberal Leader Sussan Ley. Sussan, thank you for your time. I have to say I watch Question Time closely every week. If you did not apply the pressure you did in the Parliament, do you think we would have seen any legislation at all?
No, I don't, Peter, and critical also was the fact that our leader, Peter Dutton, has been a Home Affairs Minister. He's managed our borders. So when he steps into a briefing with the government, he's all over it. And he knows that the government has actually not demanded from their officials the solutions that the Australian community seeks. So he was able to push them to these 6 additional amendments to the bill, which are all about community safety. And I know there's a lot of competing information, but this goes to the character provisions of our migration law. And I just want to remind your viewers that if there was any way these people could be in the community, could be sent back to their home countries who clearly don't want them, or sent to a third country for resettlement, that would probably already be in the works. The fact is, no one does want them, and the reasons are that this level of criminality means that they're not safe. The community is not safe if they're walking amongst us. But I've not seen a 24 hours like the last 24 hours for a long time, and all credit to Peter Dutton for actually pushing the government to do what they needed to.
Yeah, I would agree on that point. It's been a wild 24 hours, but remind us about the seriousness of some of these crimes committed. And also, I listened to you carefully in the House, I think it was yesterday, the reactions you have received from victims. Because if you listen to the Greens, they want to make people at home believe that you're all cruel, these detainees are just poor misunderstood refugees, but that's not right, is it?
It's not right. There were people who attacked others with a baseball bat, cracked their head open. There was someone who killed a pregnant woman, blew up her body with military-grade explosives. There was a woman, this was really quite, it got to me, I must say, who heard that her abuser was out on the streets, contacted the police in tears and said, "What are you going to do to protect me?" And she's been let down by Anthony Albanese and this entire government. From a week you saw that was just chaos and confusion. We had the hapless immigration minister, we had the hopeless Home Affairs minister, because what she should have done is actually direct her department well over a week ago, in fact months ago, when this possibility was coming down the track through the High Court. If we need a fix, what would that fix look like? And your officials, of course, go away and work on it. So, it's been extraordinary, Peter, because I never thought the government would be this flat-footed. I think it's quite curious too that during the 24 hours that it took to actually fix the problem, the Prime Minister was out of the country. Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles agreed. He had no choice. Meanwhile, we've got Anthony Albanese posing for selfies and passing his phone to Kevin Rudd and, making sure that he's got all the red carpet angles that he could while he's over in San Francisco. It's just not a Prime Minister who cares about his community and is backing in what they need.
What about the risk, though, even with this legislation? None of these 84 are going to go back into any sort of detention. And the risk is, as the government admitted this week, 340 more of them could well be released. Have they said they're going to do anything about the 340?
Well, we've asked for information about those 340 because we don't accept that they pose no risk. If they pose no risk, why haven't they been sent back to the countries they came from? Why haven't they been resettled in third countries? Why are they breaching the character provisions of our migration law? Who are they and what have they done? And I think the Australian community deserves to know. So while Labor's been tiptoeing around and saying, oh, you know, there could be constitutional risk. Look, the Parliament is able to push through and deal with whatever comes. But for Labor to say, well, we're too worried that it's risky to legislate, so we'll wait for the High Court decision to be handed down, which I think is due in February next year. Can you imagine the entire summer period, nothing having been done? And I honestly believe that if we hadn't pushed them, that's exactly where we would be right now.
Oh, look, I agree with that too. I mean, one of the other things that's certainly come back to me from viewers is how angry they are at the very high levels of welfare. I mean, there's rent assistance, people are being put into motels, there's travel assistance, there's even $10,000 worth of support to help these criminals set up a home in Australia. As I said, we've got pensioners in this country who can't keep the lights on. Has there been any word from the government about potentially limiting this?
All we heard from the Immigration Minister was, well, they'll be entitled to what refugees are entitled to in terms of the settlement services. And for someone who is living in their car right now, I can tell you that seems incredibly generous. And for Australians watching this, and I think many of them do know how tough it is out there because your viewers actually do get this, unlike the government members, people are living in their cars. Children are getting out of those cars dressed for school, heading off with probably no lunch and no breakfast, and pretending that they have homes to go to. This is happening right now in Australia. And, you know, we need a government that cares about this. We need a government that's prepared to take action, not a Prime Minister who's just looking for his next overseas trip. Now, I know I get, we get criticised for being so critical of these overseas visits, but I think it's a matter of priorities. Why are homeless Australians and Australians who are struggling not a priority for this government?
I've got to ask you, if I can, before we go, about the infrastructure cuts announced yesterday, $7 billion worth. Out today comes analysis that says at least 21 coalition seats are impacted, but only 8 Labor seats. They say that these aren't political, but you look at the map, regional Australia particularly is hit hard, and they're places where Labor don't have seats.
Of course it's political. How can it not be when the Infrastructure Minister has carefully sat on this review and put it out at the same time as the immigration challenges facing the government so that nobody would notice, but of course they have. 50 projects just gone. I stood in Rebecca Sharkey's electorate of Mayo in the main street of Harndorf about a year ago, and I saw these massive trucks. And I mean, I can come up with lots of examples, Peter, and you can, and your viewers can, about things we desperately need. But this was just so unsafe and so dreadful. I thought, how on earth can any federal government not be funding this? And for that to be one of the projects on the table, I mean, we saw the independent member for Mayo absolutely furious. The government's not listening to her, and it's certainly not listening to any regional members, let alone, as I said, the independents.
Well done on a strong week in the Parliament, Sussan Ley. Appreciate your time.